Hi there. So here's a fun fact. I recorded this yesterday. So let's explain why that sentence makes sense. I read my bit of text yesterday in front of this camera, and I was particularly pleased with my delivery. I have to say, I was thinking while doing it, yeah, I've really kind of nailed this now. This whole practice of kind of pushing myself out there regularly to tune in my presentation skills and all that. It's really kind of taking off. I can, and the lisp is reduced from a few months ago. What with this situation, everything seemed to be falling into place quite nicely. Insert Bond villain cackle type thing. So I did that, and it wasn't until afterwards that I realised the microphone setting was incorrect. So, in a nutshell, there wasn't any sound. So it was just me in front of a green screen, like that, which I thought about um, uh, fucking about with in some way, just for my own personal amusement. But anyway, there's just a fun fact. I think I'll plough through this pretty quickly. So what I have here is going to be the last uh, written ramble, like a few of the others that I've done, and then read out, dictated uh, onto a video, and posted it onto all the various online platforms I use. Um, this is the last one of its kind because what is going to happen after this is I'm setting myself a challenge to work on more comprehensive slideshow presentations. So, in a video format, obviously, there's not many other. Can't do it in a physical format at the moment. Yes, and that's when I'll be pulling in a few bits of research and embedding it more um, in something substantial like that, rather than just the progressive sort of rambles that I've been doing now, which has been based on a modest level of personal research into a few subjects and self-education, but it's been your typical kind of creative darting about from one thought to another haphazardly, and fundamentally this whole process has been just a phase to improve my ability to dictate clearly, um, and process my own thoughts and deliver them coherently, so that I can then move that onto something a bit more ambitious. I can so for a point here that I'd made a note of, to justify my work intellectually, not out of snobbishness or anything. That's not what I'm trying to do. More to align what I want to do with other relevant subjects and be part of something bigger than just me. Um, as I've mentioned before, not that it matters because this is just going to be a reiteration of a lot of things, but just, as has been progressively a bit more kind of refined towards a core set of ideas or personal outlook that I can then feed back off and layer up with some interesting factual complementary information on these slideshows. How would you call it? Sort of leaning down and then bulking up, if you like a fitness analogy or something. I don't know. So yeah, that's and the end game, if you like, is to create a platform what I'm doing, how I can present it publicly to uh, promote opportunities for collaborative projects. I'm fascinated with many subjects relating to health, as I've already talked about and will talk about some more. But I don't expect I'm ever going to be fully qualified enough in any specific area to really push that in as meaningful or worthwhile direction as possible. Something that is bigger than me, something that is more meaningful than just an artist churning out drawings or little sound projects or whatever I may or may not do anyway. Um, so yeah, uh, I want to educate myself well enough in some of those subjects to incorporate in what I'm doing to at least open a window of opportunity where other people might think, I kind of get the gist of what the purpose of that might be, and feel inclined to chip in with something interesting or constructive and blah blah blah. You know the one. And so this was all leading up to the presentation in June, which God knows if that's going to happen or not, or if there's going to be some arrangement to move it to a digital platform rather than whatever venue it was in London. But that is all remaining to be seen. This is the last ramble of its kind, really, and really doesn't. It's irrelevant whether or not you, as a viewer, may have seen previous ones, because, like I said, the whole process is progressively, cyclically trying to flesh out some thread, or all the underlying threads to what I do, to what's important to me, my own outlook, and reflect on inevitably on my own personal progress as well, and how that's going to determine things. So here we go. I better make sure sound is actually on. Yes, there we go. Right. This is going to be the last entry I type out before recording. That's because my next entry will involve a slideshow presentation, and I want to do my utmost to treat it like a proper presentation. Right now I just want one more crack at formally explaining, or attempting to explain, the relevance of societal health to what I'm working on, which has gained more poignance to me in light of the current situation we have, both globally and personal situation, informing where I should take this. Globally is pretty obvious, I don't have to explain any of that in excess, but I'll give a very short backstory to my specific developments in light of this, and then reflect on a matter of public health in the context of the lockdown, and then finally how I can make my ongoing creative process more conducive with that. So I think I've just about reached the stage where I've started asking myself questions like, when will I know I'm starting to lose my marbles? Naturally, factors of isolation are going to affect us in nuanced ways, but I quickly realised that my general regime at the moment isn't a radical, or hasn't been a radical departure from what it would otherwise be. I'm still doing my day job, working remotely, and I've always committed, when I'm staying in, to leave the house every day for some fresh air anyway, and which incidentally is actually quite fresh where I live now. I can hear birdsong, and the air has a more distinctive taste of oxygen to it, living next to an otherwise busy road. In fact, to be completely honest, despite the gravity of this whole situation, I dare say I'm not the only one who's slightly apprehensive about everything going back to normal. When I get to feel inadequate when people with more time, money, and friends than I have, announce their really amazing time on all the digital platforms that I have to use to maintain any hopeful social life at all. This is not a unique affliction to have, and it is not meant to undermine the severity of this pandemic. It is more an unlikely series of events where one global health issue eloquently seems to reveal another global health issue, um, albeit in a more invisible one of the mind, with indeterminate consequences at the moment. In a nutshell, feelings of isolation to one degree or another is nothing new for many people. Please don't feel disparaged about this, because I believe this is one of a few unlikely issues that might actually present opportunities out of this situation, at least in terms of shifting awareness, altering public opinion and everything. Bad as it is, our collective perception of health as a multifaceted body of knowledge has, in my humble opinion, long been warped to the point we often administer our own self-destruction without sometimes realizing it. And yet, with a very little bit of fine-tuning, with self-administered solutions that are aligned with modern science, I believe there is often more effective, accessible, and suitable approaches to health on the whole. This is where I try to establish my own central philosophy, if you like, that propels my own interests in health-related subjects, and why I find the process of learning more so empowering and inspiring. Sorry about those noises, just aligning my tongue there. It's important. I've encountered a cynical and dangerous common fallacy that any health-related endeavour comes loaded with some form of arduous sacrifice and suffering, something that's only suited to those life addicts or gym bunnies, to name a few terms that I've found. My own passion and personal outlook from all this has formed in part in response to that kind of thing. So, and as I'm aware that health exploits are often exploited and misdirected for business gains, as so many things are anyway, so too I suspect there is a toxic perception that distorts happiness and pleasure from addiction. I could reel off a few strands from this point: politically, socially, emotional health. Indeed, I'm inclined to perceive most of it, if not all, newsworthy issues are in essence reporting on issues of public health. And I think it's more empowering and constructive to observe events through that somewhat clinical but constructive lens. To carry this personal outlook effectively into a creative process, which is where I fit in, funnily enough, and indeed to find the parallels that were already there. I've meditated on keywords and terms that are rubbed off on me well. The process of adaptation even comes to mind time and time again. It elegantly summarises all successful examples of health, vitality and virtue as far as I've wrapped my head around so far. It is our means of sustaining a mild to moderate level of constant adaptation from a microscopic level all the way up to which room we might walk in and out of. What feels like 1,000 different cycles of stimulation and rest all going on at once, which presents what I think is a very binary selection made every millisecond between denial resistance as one thing, and adaptation. These are the microsecond choices. So I feel like this binary mechanism I'm describing chimes with where my mind was at when I made binaries a key term during my MA work, but I think I'm understanding it better now. I think there is some way of taking this theorizing, or whatever you want to call it, and using it in a creative process. To an extent, I think I already do, because the thing that I often say, that I look for the most in any form of art that I appreciate, is when we are presented with something that might suggest any number of things, which typically leaves a few people scratching their heads, in frustration, in lack of more guidance, whereas the other people are equally uncertain what specifically is going on. The only difference is they're okay with it, even embracing the novelty. I equate this to humour as a prime example. Our expectations have to be either subverted, or just remain fairly ambiguous. Silliness, nonsense, dada, if you like. I think this temperament says a lot about my musings on a sustained state of adaptation over resistance, a decision that happens faster than we could ever grasp. But with good practice and patience, we do have more agency over in the long term. Recently, the art that I've been producing seems to be finding its footing as imagery that's influenced by and attempts to evoke some way neurological and biological structures or mechanisms. Whereas before, when I would incorporate universal images of figures, body parts, or random objects into my drawings as a device to pull I or you in, a familiar access point into something far more indefinite and abstract. Now, however, the lines are blurred, figuratively speaking, between what is definitely a human body or some kind of obvious mechanism, and the ambiguous forms that could be a thing. It could be another thing, it could be nothing at all, and all of those at the same time. I'm quite pleased about this. I think it's an outcome I've been going for a while, at least unconsciously. But in essence, what I'll be making a point of here, at least for my own described endeavours, is to evoke a sense of the positive and negative binary charges intersecting with an indefinite number of outcomes entwined. However much I or anyone might choose to read into something I make, I like the prospect that I'm putting in some pattern or mechanism that runs deep, or at least seems to, conducive to sustained adaptation. If I can attempt to summarise this in a nutshell, I'm interested in prompting the observer to settle into the vagueness. Like any good trance induction, be it a thrill or a calming buzz, it is, like my video material, a cyclical mechanism, like we are, at least like I like to think we are, and aligns itself to our stream of thought and perception in any multitude of ways. Going back to what I first said about the lockdown situation, I've come to terms after a few weeks of ticking off various things that need doing, as many people are, that the list of things that need doing never stops. It is all very well having a few things done and getting a few things done even, but now I recall my 2020 resolution, which I haven't been able to fully execute until now, which is far more systemic than mere things to do or sort out. It's the whole personal outlook on life and work ethic, and even though I get fanatical about the fields of health, I still needed to alter something from the ground up about myself, so I've been meditating a little more and unpacking my day-to-day habits and mechanisms to future-proof a better mood as as how I'm kind of spinning it for myself. I have to accept the list will always be there discreetly in the background, and things will get done at some rate and in some order or another. So when I do get the chance to invest my energy in the art practice, I just have to keep running this cyclical momentum of adaptive mechanisms and watch them transmute into their creative outcomes, whatever they are. Every cycle might get just a bit more easy to explain and at the same time confusing. It is fundamental to me. I propel this in a pragmatic direction that is easy to identify with for all the right reasons. Even if it involves incorporating rambles like this endlessly, while the observer wistfully wistfully drifts in and out of meaning. In fact, that already sounds like a wonderful prospect to me in some ways. So a quick note as an aside, relevant to some of the stuff that I have been working on. I really like the neurology term action potential. That's been a sort of working title for the mural design, which is suspended re COVID-19, and I'm tentatively figuring out now what pace and manner that's going to develop in the immediate future. That would have been on display right now, actually. Yeah. So that was scheduled for this April. And we'll see where that goes. Like I said. So why am I attempting to formalise my art practice anyway? This is a slight reiteration, but it's just a few sentences. I'm going to read it because it's something to do, and I want to present my ideas / intentions in a detailed enough way that could attract attention from people who might be willing to offer more qualified input. I'm hoping for this because I'm craving some form of immediate pragmatism in my life's endeavours. The art side of things will always probably have vague, ambiguous qualities to it, and I like it that way. But at the same time, I crave more structure and simplicity in valuing myself and just operating well. I want to see my actions clearly traceable to worthwhile outcomes. In this instance, it's felt like. In instances, it's felt like that before. I didn't proofread this or anything. In instances, it's felt like that before. It's been a relieving sensation, and I don't want my art practice to push me inwardly like so many artists may experience. I'd rather it be outwardly and more involved with others. The field of medicine and various therapies is exciting to me because it's pragmatism that is almost universally valued. I'm not an expert in any of these things, nor will I ever be, but there is 10 years of personal consideration around these areas that I want to push in some meaningful direction. So that's a wrap for what was in part unclear and for the most part a ramble, but it is the last ramble for a while, and it was necessary to do. There was a level of needing to offload thoughts towards a common direction, as is often the case with these, and now I start a phase of generating material in slideshows with some actual references in a similar cycle as with these, but incrementally it will feel more professional, above all clear and concise as I go on. So that's the end of that. I'm just gonna reel off standard updates. So I'm halfway through a very interesting free online course in the microbiome. I'll admit most of it is above my head, but that there's enough incoming from that to probably inform what I do creatively in the immediate future. I do think, particularly in light of like I've said, how I expect we're all going to become more hyper aware of our physical and mental health, and hopefully perceive public health and individual health more as an all embodying thing that incorporates mental and physical health. Um, for some of the points that I already kind of went into, I I think looking at some of the modern science as well, and some of the potential advantages environmentally as well as just reflectively from this situation. Um, it sucks that things have to get so bad and lots of people have to die uh, for such a tipping point to happen. That being the case, I do believe optimistically that this is a tipping point for the greater good, because I think enough people are going to make it that way um, in reflection. That is my personal outlook on this, and a positive one. I hope you'll agree. Um, I have, for what it's worth, gotten into the habit of sharing one piece of positive, productive news on Facebook every day, but that also prompts me to read those articles more often and just keep more of a stream of positive news flowing in as well, just relevant news overall. But if you're balancing it out with at least one, and I'm not talking about some heartwarming or cat got saved from up a tree, I'm talking about slightly more meaningful news that could actually unlock solutions to big problems. And there is good and bad, really good things and really bad things happening every single day. So it's a really good idea to acknowledge both ends of that spectrum every day, whatever your general source of news is churning out. So there's some very good online resources for the more positive end of news, which I would recommend just googling. And these recent online courses I've been doing, meshing very well with recent books and content that I've been absorbing about health, which just seems to kind of be developing in a very interesting sort of way in light of this current situation. And I guess that partly as well makes me optimistic about how we can, I suppose, restructure a more global common narrative about our perceptions of health. And as I'd said before, I think health is a broader, more complicated and nuanced term, that the more we recognise that and recognise the health issues in every subject, environmentally, politically, virally, in terms of being ill, is more of an obvious one, I suppose, mental health, etc., etc. That's my little 2 cents on that. Yeah, uh, yeah, no. I mean, it would be very easy for me to ramble on endlessly about that one, but that's kind of it for there. Did I have any other things to update? No. Bye.